When you're trying to sell anything, whether baked beans or a political party, you have to understand the customer. Sadly, many conservative politicians do not understand Muslim voters. I'm going to tackle 6 questions. What qualifies me to talk about this subject? Who are British Muslims? What makes them different? How do Muslims vote? What have conservatives said to Muslim voters? And what should we do different? So what qualifies me to talk about this issue? I've lived in the UK for over 65 years, from when I was less than 2 years old. And I've seen this country from 2 completely different perspectives. I grew up in a very poor immigrant family in the Pakistani community of Manchester, and I still live in Manchester. I still feel connected to that community, although I'm away most of the time. I also attended Cambridge University. I became a partner in Price Waterhouse, and I spent my career giving tax advice to multinational companies. So basically, 2 parts of my life which were chalk and cheese. And I find that helps me to understand the world in a way that many people from Muslim backgrounds, for example, who live in darkest Bradford do not. And equally, white British people from the Shires don't see the world from the other side. When I was young, I was left-wing, like many young people are, but I joined the Conservative Party at the age of 33 for one reason. I became convinced about the virtues of free market capitalism, and I could see Margaret Thatcher transforming British society. For the last 30 plus years, I've been a Conservative with a big C, but I'm not a Conservative with a small c. I saw Margaret Thatcher changing things. That's why I joined the party. And the very first time I attended the party conference was the year the IRA bombed it. That's a coincidence. I didn't go again until 2008, but that was because I just got very busy with work. So let's take a closer look at British Muslims. There are about 3 million of them. That's about 5% of the population. Although that percentage will grow because it's a much younger demographic community than the white British community. So if you're looking at children under the age of 9, for example, from memory it's something like 10% or 12%. It's a much higher percentage when you're looking at much younger age groups. Although eventually it will stabilise because birth patterns amongst immigrant communities tend to eventually mirror those of the community that they moved into, and there are signs of that already happening, for example, with the Algerian community in France. Ethnically, even now, more than half of them are descended from immigrants from the Indian subcontinent, including me. Although the proportion of people from Arab backgrounds, African backgrounds and other minorities is growing. And don't forget that at least 100,000 Muslims in this country are white British converts. The current ambassador to Saudi Arabia, for example, is one of them. Somebody I liaise with an enormous amount over the last sort of 7 years is a chap who's the director of one of my charity projects, and he was head boy at Eton, and his great-grandfather was Lord Jellicoe, who led the British fleet at the Battle of Jutland. So Muslims are extremely varied. The most important thing about Muslims, which should be obvious, is that they are defined by having a religious belief. That's the only thing that Muslims have in common. While that should be obvious, many people who don't have a religious belief themselves overlook the importance of that and focus on Muslims only in their capacity as ethnic minorities. And I think that's a fundamental mistake. Yes, they are an ethnic minority, but their religion really, really matters to most of them. And that's what makes them different. So how do Muslims vote? On average, people's voting behaviour reflects their socio-economic background. Yes, there are champagne socialists and there are working class Tories. But on average, the more you earn, the more likely you are to vote Conservative. Just as a statement of fact, not about how people should behave, but how people do behave. Suppose I told you that somebody owns a business which employs 10 people and makes him £200,000 a year, and I asked you to guess how this person votes. Your logical guess should be that this person votes Conservative. If I give you one extra fact, that this person is a Muslim, your logical choice should change, again, in terms of what this person will actually do as opposed to what you think he should do. Because your logical guess should be that he then votes Labour. Muslims overwhelmingly vote Labour. In 2015, we managed to get 25% of them to vote for us, which was a big improvement on about 15% in 2010. But in 2017, we will have fallen back, although I haven't seen any religion-specific polling. But there is ethnic minority polling, which shows that we fell back with ethnic minorities as a whole. And as I said, most Muslims, apart from the white British converts, are ethnic minorities. So let me go on to what Conservatives have said to British Muslims. My wife and I were both in our mid-teens. I did originally have a precise age in here, but she made me take it out. Where we were in our mid-teens when Enoch Powell made his Rivers of Blood speech. And I know the phrase Rivers of Blood does not occur in the speech, but that's what everybody called it, and that's what I call it. That speech did not affect me directly, because I lived in a Manchester slum in a very mixed environment, and nothing changed in the behaviour of my neighbours as a consequence. My wife's family lived in a suburb that was almost all white, and neighbours started sending her family hate mail, people that they'd previously got on with very well. And people have very long memories. When I started writing articles on Conservative Home, mentioning Enoch and elsewhere, mentioning Enoch Powell as a reason why ethnic minorities don't vote Conservative, some people poo-pooed it. They said I was living in the past, that I was out of touch. It was decades ago, I mean. That's why I was delighted when Lord Ashcroft's focus groups amongst ethnic minorities, which he ran in 2012, found Enoch Powell spontaneously being mentioned by ethnic minority people as a reason why they didn't vote Conservative, even though in some cases these people were not even born when Enoch Powell was making his speeches. And for more details about those articles, if you just search for Enoch Powell's name on my website, you'll find them. The sad thing is that there have been many other Conservatives who also made British Muslims less likely to vote Conservative. And I'm not going to give you a long list, but I do have two examples where both the policy was wrong and the words were wrong, and two other cases where the policy was actually absolutely right, but the words were still wrong. My first villain, I think of him that way, is Philip Holloway MP. In 2014, he promoted a private member's bill to ban the wearing of niqab and the burqa in public. The niqab is the veil that covers the face with a slit for the eyes. The burqa is the thing that goes over your head with a gauze to look through. And I personally don't like women wearing them. But both I, and more importantly Theresa May, are absolutely adamant about people's freedom to dress as they wish. But the problem is that the average voter, and certainly the average Muslim voter, cannot tell the difference between a private member's bill, which is going to go from a backbencher, which is going to go absolutely nowhere, and official Conservative Party government policy. They can't. And we at the Conservative Muslim Forum were getting emails from Muslims out in the country saying, why is the Conservative Party doing this? And I went and saw Philip Holloway tried to discourage him, couldn't get anywhere. The bill, of course, died. I mean, it got nowhere at all. He was massively down in the ballot. I don't think he was even in the ballot. So his bill never had the slightest chance of going anywhere, but it hurt us. My second villain is contemporaneous. It's Councillor Jeff Driver, the leader of Lancashire County Council. He's a Conservative. And he's got a personal obsession with banning non-stun meat, including non-stun halal meat, which is served in some Lancashire schools where they have very high percentages of Muslim people. Now, the view on stunning amongst Muslims is not uniform, unlike the view on stunning amongst Jews. The Jews, it's very clear. If an animal has been stunned, it can never be kosher. It doesn't matter who kills it, how the person kills it. The act of stunning stops it being kosher. With Muslims, you get two opinions. Either you can stun and provided you kill it the right way, it's halal, or if you stun, even if you kill it the right way, it's not halal. And that's why Jeff Driver is able to argue that he's still providing halal meat, except it's stunned halal meat. Some people will accept that, some people won't, but it's a total outrage to all British Muslims, including the ones who, at a personal level, would be willing to eat it. Because what you're saying to those Muslims who regard that meat as not halal, tough. And I can't think of any other way of making British Muslims hate the Conservative Party more, because again, people don't see him as one guy in Lancashire Council, the leader of Lancashire Council. They see him as a Conservative. The more challenging cases are cases where the policy was right, is right, but the words somehow were still wrong. And again, I've got two examples. David Cameron's spoken about radicalisation on many occasions, starting with his 2011 speech at the Munich Security Conference, and most recently about a week and a bit ago in Washington. And he's saying the same things, and he was right in 2011 and he's right now. And I agree with his policy. In fact, 2011, the Munich speech, was the first time I ever appeared on the national news, because the BBC got me to go on the news as one of the rare Muslims willing to speak on David Cameron's side on this issue. The problem is that David Cameron has never managed to sound sympathetic to British Muslims when he's making his speeches about radicalisation. When I read his speeches and listen to him, he doesn't sound sympathetic, and I'm on his side. Just imagine how he comes over to people who are more sort of nuanced, know less about the issue. And sadly, he's never asked me for help on speech writing. Equally, I haven't volunteered, but I know I'll be wasting my time sort of volunteering. But it's a classic of having the right policy, but just not managing to find the right words to express it. And my second example, where the news is actually a bit better, is on British values, or what most of the time used to be called British values. And I'm not going to repeat the list of values. Everybody knows about the democracy, the rule of law, tolerance, respect, etc. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the values. And almost all British Muslims support them, apart from a few British Muslims who frankly are the bad guys. The problem I found, and listening to other people, was calling them British values. Personally, I just found the name a bit silly, because there's nothing exclusively British about them. They're French values, American values, Swedish values, Muslim values, as much as they are British values. But the name I just thought was a bit silly. But other British Muslims took it incredibly badly. And thinking about it, to be completely honest, it sounds like the white colonial administrator come to tell the brown savages how to be civilized. And for several years, I've been telling every senior Conservative I can find, and I've had the opportunity to tell this one-to-one to Theresa May, to stop calling them British values. And I seem to have got through. About a week or so ago, the the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, to get its new correct name right, Sajid Javid published a green paper on integration, and in front of that is a page from the Prime Minister. And what caught my eye, because I've read this page, I haven't read the rest of the paper yet, or I intend to, and I'll quote, "This is a moment for us to proudly promote the values that unite us: democracy, free speech, mutual respect and the rule of law. These values allow us to enjoy our individual freedoms, to lead varied lives in diverse communities, but they come with a responsibility to respect the rights of others to live as they choose. That is why our multi-ethnic, multi-faith society has been so successful. These values must prevail." Only somebody who's obsessing about the issue like me will notice what Theresa May doesn't say. She did not use the words British values, so I think she listened to me. So let me turn now to some positive advice on what we should do differently. The most important thing, no surprise given what I've been saying earlier, is to get our language right. And I focused on this at a fringe meeting at the 2014 Welsh Conservatives Conference. It's the one and only time I've been to the Welsh Conservatives Conference. It's a bit sort of remote. And you can find the speech quite easily on my website by searching for the word Welsh on my website, because it's a word I use so rarely. And the key is to avoid language that divides. Train yourself to always use the word we for only one purpose: to refer to everybody in the country. So when talking about the Conservative Party, don't use the word we. Talk about Conservatives. And formulations that sound so natural can be incredibly damaging, like "your values are the same as our values." That implies a complete disconnect between you and us. Secondly, don't try to defend the past. Many Muslims care passionately about what they regard as the mess that the British Empire left behind in places like Kashmir and Palestine. And if that comes up, respond by saying that none of us can change the past, which is true, and instead move the discussion on to what we can do together to make the future better. And of course, for local elections, remind everybody that local councils do not have any control over foreign policy. Apart from the fact that we have much better policies on things like tax, the economy, schools, there's one overarching point that will play very well with British Muslims if we can communicate it right. Philosophically, even though the Labour Party does contain many religious people, I believe the ideological basis of the Labour Party today is primarily atheist. The Labour Party really doesn't understand religion and the importance of religion to people. And we need to get over to Muslim voters that because so many leading Conservatives are devoted Christians from the Prime Minister down, we understand the importance of what it means to be a Muslim in a way that the Labour Party does not. And that leads on to an educational point. I want to imagine yourself talking to a voter who is a practicing Jew. Imagine also that you have never heard of Abraham leaving his home in Mesopotamia. You've never heard of Joseph going down into Egypt and the problems of Pharaoh and the grain. You've never heard of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt or Babylon conquering Jerusalem. How effectively do you think you could get over to that voter that you really cared about his freedom to practice Judaism when you know nothing at all about what Judaism means? And unfortunately, many Conservative campaigners have a roughly equivalent ignorance of Islam. They know next to nothing about it apart from what they see on television about ISIS. And there really is no substitute for education. As a bare minimum, My website has a 10-page guide to Islam for non-Muslims, and I wrote it many years ago because my wife pointed out how there was such a crying lack of anything of that sort of shortness, and we couldn't find anything anywhere, so eventually I wrote it myself. If you want real credibility, the Quran is actually quite easy to read, and my website recommends one particular translation of the Quran for first-time readers. It has a guide to Quran translations generally, but there's one published by Oxford University Press, translated in 2006 by Muhammad Halim, which is the one that I recommend. With 30 years of serving clients as a tax advisor, I learned something quite fundamental. The customer is always right. And if Muslims are not voting Conservative, it's our fault.